House Corrections and Institutions. We are continuing our work this afternoon, and we're going to be hearing from the VHCB, Vermont Housing Conservation Board. We always, in the capital bill, always give a portion of our budget to VHCB. I should know what line we're on, but I'm just not there yet. You're just on the clean water section.
Section line 103.
103. So we're on section 10, which is water. It is 10. Is it? It would be just 103. Section 3. So Gus, welcome. And, we had a handout with us. And folks will have that. And for the tab for folks, you need to go to the clean water tab.
22.
22. Has so many other documents. It's hard to get to the page. It's Tuesday. We're not focused yet. So for folks who are just coming in, we are on section 10. It's the clean water section. And we have 800,000 in lines 102, which is our agricultural water quality projects. And then the 2 million in land conservation water quality projects 103, lines 103. And it's under the tab clean water in our book. So we have with us Gus Seelig, and Gus, welcome.
Thank you.
102, 103. So Gus, why don't you introduce yourself for the record and then we'll get started.
Okay, so for the record, I'm Gus Seelig. I'm the director for the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board. With me today is our policy director, Kelly Major, the director of our Farm and Public Liability Program, Liz Gleason. And Madam Chair, I may have misunderstood, but I thought the committee wanted both an overview of the Housing and Conservation Board and how we do our work,
Yes.
and then get specifically to the line items in the clean water
Yes.
section of the budget. So we'll do both those things.
Do both. Yep.
First, I need to say it's a pleasure to be in this room. Madam Chair, is this the third or fourth different room that I've been in with you over the third?
Third.
Okay.
Sensitive subject.
Yeah, I'm sure, but I'm glad to be with you any day of the week. We were talking as we got started, and I think the Dean of the House, Representative Bongard, Senator Bongart's now, and Senator Westman are the people that I worked with when we began this program in the 80s. And it's always a pleasure to be with you. And in introducing the board to those of you who are newer, the governor and legislators asked us to make transformational investments. We're in the capital bill this year just for clean water related and land conservation related activities. But over the years, we've also funded our affordable housing work. And we'll talk more about why we're in the capital bill at all. But in addition to getting funding from the capital bill, we get funding from the property transfer tax. The picture you see here is one of those transformational investments. This is off of Route 7 in Shelburne, where we're building a new neighborhood that will have 68 rental apartments and 26 condominiums when the work is complete.
And it's even more progress than that right now.
Yeah, that's
You're on second, third floor and it's bigger. It's
Yeah,
looking good
yeah.
because I live right there. So,
Okay, good to know that.
Hopefully you're not developing.
no, that's not mine. Way too big for me. Out of my ballpark.
What section are we? We're on section 10. Okay, it's the clean water.
102 and 3, right?
Yep. got it.
This next slide is about our statutory mission. Again, for those of you who are new to our work, it can be found in 10 VSA chapter 15. But what I want to point out to you, we kind of function as a public grant maker. Very simply, you give us money, we get it back to people in your communities to do things that are consistent with our statute. That's what we do as an organization. And the statute tells us not just to conserve land or preserve housing or develop housing. It asks us to do it as a matter of primary importance to economic vitality and quality of life. And so to look at one corner of the state in Bennington, I think all these three projects do all of those things, and I've just talked briefly about them. Prospect Mountain was owned by two people, and they ran it well for 30 years. I think it's either the highest or second highest cross-country ski center in the state, so it's got snow when the rest of us sometimes do not. And when they ran out of energy to run it, a nonprofit group said, this is really a great resource for our community. It's about 10 minutes drive from the corner of the next picture, the Putnam block of 7 and 9. And they set up a nonprofit and asked us to help with the acquisition, and we did that. And it's continued to function as a great facility for the community, the cross-country skiers over the last, I think, this started pre-pandemic, so probably 6 years ago that they took title to it. The block I visited before the pandemic, and the upper floors had been vacant since the 1970s. Greatly underutilized resource. There was an opportunity because of a family decision to actually get a full 2 acres that this building sits on and adjoining buildings sit on all at once. And the community really came together and said, this is really important. A developer from Brattleboro took the helm, and both the hospital and Bennington College said, if Bennington's downtown is struggling, then our institutions will struggle as well. So this has been the subject of a great revitalization effort that includes some affordable housing, a lot of commercial development as well. And I think really key to making Bennington the community that it wants to be across the state. You'll see this kind of work in Chair is aware of buildings in downtown Springfield, in St. Johnsbury, the former hotel. We did a turnaround with the community on. We're working on the Sacred Heart school complex up in Newport as we speak. So downtowns are a big part of our work. And again, this is about economic vitality. The Morgan Street wetlands was not pitched to us as a project to conserve by a group like the Nature Conservancy. Actually, when we got the presentation on it, it was pitched by the local economic development authority, who viewed it as a quality of life enhancement that would either attract young people to Bennington or keep them in town. And so that was a project we did also a few years back. That also relates to the water quality mission in front of us. This is briefly about our work since 2020 in conservation. And as we get into water quality, a big part of our work has been to protect the surface waters of the state. And we do that both on farmland projects and natural area projects or public recreation projects. So you'll always, for instance, the state's regulatory practices for agriculture are there need to be 25-foot buffers along waterways and farms. We always require 50 feet. A lot of wetland protection work we're doing, and there's special terms when we buy a conservation easement to make sure those wetlands are protected. And our partners are often working, and that's the case with the Poison Oak property in St. Albans, where there's a 135-acre wetlands complex to do wetlands restoration work as well. So that's become a growing part of our mission. This is a list of all of our kind of conservation and rural community development programs. And I won't go over them, but you see water quality stands out here. A little later on, for those of you who represent rural communities, Liz is going to talk about the Farm and Forest Viability Program and the Water Quality Grant Program, but also the Rural Economic Development Initiative, which is a grant writing program for rural communities. The picture here is the old Boy Scout camp in Benson, and on one side of the camp sits Lake Sunset, and the other side sits Lake Sunrise. And the Boy Scouts wanted to sell the camp grounds to the state. I heard from a lot of local legislators, Madison and Rutland County, saying Can't the state buy it? Would you help? We said we would, but the state looked at the infrastructure and said, it's going to take too big an investment. We don't want that liability right now. So the legislators asked, what else could we do? And I called the Vermont Land Trust. They got involved and they found a partner and buyer for for the camp. I think it was Camp Sunrise under the Boy Scouts. And it being purchased by Outright Vermont, has been purchased by Outright Vermont, and they will run a camp there in the coming years, which I think is going to be a terrific thing for the communities that they serve. To talk briefly, you and your colleagues have been super supportive of our housing work since the beginning of the pandemic in 2020. There's been lots of ARPA money and one-time money appropriated, and we've leveraged it almost $2 to every dollar spent. And when you ask us what kind of housing can we do, it is everything from home ownership and rental housing to supporting mobile home communities. You heard the governor in his one of his addresses this year talk about an infill program. That's something we've done on a number of occasions since 2020, but we were doing it before then. We were able to establish a program to support farmers and farm workers in improving farm worker housing. And because of the opioid epidemic, we've now opened, or in the midst of opening, 4 recovery residences all over the state for people in recovery. For those of you who just have a constituent who has become physically disabled, the Center for Independent Living has a program that we support that provides bathroom modifications and ramps. So while we mostly are doing projects of the size and spending lots of money that you saw on the opening slide in Shelburne, we're also able to help through the Vermont Center for Independent Living with somebody with that kind of need. And please make our phone ring or our partners' phones ring if you see any way we can be helpful to your constituents. As I said in opening, we do a lot of work in both downtowns and new town centers. South Burlington actually established a new town center. This is the second building. There were 2 buildings built almost back to back. This is a senior housing building in downtown, in the new town center in South Burlington. The other one was family housing. And the private developer who created this development has now done a partnership with a medical center to build housing for their workforce. There's a TIF district up in St. Albans. That's been one of the things the governor talked about in his talks on housing. We have financed about 150 of the 270 homes that have been built in the TIF district. The first ones are right across from City Hall, and that's a senior building going up in the TIF district today. In terms of recovery housing, we were last summer in Bennington to open Squire House, a beautiful historic building right on the main drag for people in recovery. There's a second building that will open or is about to open in Bennington. There's another facility in Barry, and then there's about 28 beds up in Essex that we're working on. And the other picture is a family supported by Central Vermont Refugee Action Network. This is an Afghan family who supported and worked with our troops during that conflict. And groups of people in Montpelier have supported those families as they've moved into town. But keeping them in town became very, very difficult. So we created a little fund so that when a property came on the market, they could buy it right away, make full price offers rather than competing, because every time they went and bid on something, they were losing out. So we've done this on about 3 occasions now to help them help and support these families in Montpelier. This is a list of all of our housing programs. Again, I will not read through all of them, but to speak to infill housing. The mobile home park you see is in Waltham. It was abandoned. Basically, there was just 1 home being occupied out of 14. The buildings were rotting away. And we replaced all of them with what are net zero modular homes that have come out well and performed well over a decade. Yesterday, I was with Chair Wood and Representative Stevens in Waterbury to break ground. That's an architect's rendering in Waterbury of a 26-unit building that's going to be built there. For those of you who are as old as I and listened to WDEV in the 70s, this is Rusty Parker's house lot that it's being built on. for a little bit of history. And back before there was public radio, there was WDEV serving, giving all of us our news. And I know you've already had some discussion about Ben High. We hope that project will happen. It's facing some economic challenges, but we've provided some funding for the 17 units that would be affordable. We hope we'll know in another month or two whether that all its funding will come together.
So can I stop you there?
Yeah.
Gus, because we just, we're looking into what the administration's requesting of us for Bennington High. So VHCB, you said is putting money towards 17 units.
Right.
In this. Do you know that source of money on your end? Is it through the property transfer tax piece of the appropriations, or is it part of our capital budget?
It's actually ARPA.
It's ARPA. And the ARPA went through VHCB money?
We received about $120 million in that range of ARPA funding. So this is one of the projects that got an ARPA award.
Gotcha.
And just more specifically about Bennington High, are they going to put 17 units in the high school?
Yes.
And is that it?
No, my understanding of the project, there are going to be 3 condominiums. There'll be a 17-unit affordable housing condominium. There'll be an additional, I think it's 20 or 22 unit market rate condominium.
Great.
And then there's going to be a condominium for the balance of the building, which is going to, I think, include a childcare facility, space for the Y, and other community facilities.
That's fantastic.
You know more than the person who was supposed to tell us.
Well,
He did say
It's not.
it's only going to be 30 apartments.
it may be 32, it may be,
Only said.
I can get back to you on the exact number, but I do have it. I just don't. We see so many projects, I can't keep all the numbers in my head.
So, may not be the right place to ask, but you mentioned that is having funding challenges.
I think that's a piece of why it's in the capital bill.
Can you elaborate? Since it would be asked to spend money on it, I want to know, but if you don't know, then, or if it's not your purview, whatever.
So we are waiting at this moment for updated cost estimates. The building is going to be much more expensive than the developer presented the proposal 2 years ago. And each condominium comes with its own financing. So what I can't speak to are the other 2 condominiums, other than they're using a tool called New Markets Tax Credits to support at least the commercial space. And I'm not an expert on that, but obviously all 3 need to work financially in order for there to be a deal. So I'm waiting at this moment for new budget. I know the building has been vacant for 30 years. I know the community has voted to give it several $1 million of its own tax money, so it's clearly a high priority for Bennington. I've seen there's some recent controversy by reading the newspapers. These things are hard, complicated deals. If you talk with Chair Mahali, we worked with him on the restoration of the East Calais store. 3 affordable apartments in a historic building to get the store reestablished in East Calais. And he'll tell you that this $2.7 million project had 27 funding sources. So doing these, if there was an easy way to fix this building, some developer could have made money at it. They would have done it years ago. It wouldn't sit vacant for 30 years. When I was talking with Senator Engels, who was a realtor up in Orleans County, he said to me last year, "Now I understand you guys. You are showing up at places like Sacred Heart when the market doesn't work."
Right.
He said, "I've shown that building to 4 or 5 clients. Nobody can make the numbers work. That's a piece of your role." So what I would say to you is, I don't know the details of the governor's request. We have not underwritten the commercial part of it. These are hard projects to pull together, and we're waiting for the final budgets to come to us. And we hope, because it's been vacant so long, that it'll work.
Thank you.
Do you have a ballpark figure in terms of what the project cost would be? Because I know you're looking for your budget for the 17.
I don't have those numbers.
But
we can, I mean, we're waiting for a final budget on the housing side, which should come in the next few weeks, but I don't have those numbers.
So what VHCB would be supporting is the funding gap for those 17 units.
That's correct,
And they would be perpetually affordable,
right?
all 17?
All 17.
Kevin?
And with all these funds coming from all these different sources, let's say we're successful.
Yeah.
Who owns the resulting property? How is that managed?
Well, there is a complex structure that the developer should probably speak to rather than me, but each of the three condominiums will have an ownership. So with the housing tax credit partnership, the developer or developers, I think there's now will be general partners, co-general partners, and the investors through something called the low-income housing tax credit will be called limited partners.
Okay.
Under the tax credit law, the limited partners have to be in the project for 15 years, and they expect a rate of return for their investment, which they mostly get through the benefits of having gotten these tax credits. Most of the tax credit investors in low-income housing tax credit projects are financial institutions, banks in Vermont. There may be others. In the past, we had National Life invest in tax credits, financiers, but it's primarily banks that are the investors. I can't recall right now who the tax credit investor is.
I would answer my question.
Okay, I'll stop there.
I know. I didn't want to assume, but that's what I.
So who owns this building? Is it the school district that owns it? Is it the town of Bennington that owns it?
I can't remember right now.
There's a Mr. Gil, I'm sorry, I don't mean to interrupt. There is a Mr. Gilbert, who I guess technically owns it at this point. There is, then the Hales Development is looking to do the construction on it. And supposedly, they're supposed to, I think, own it at the end of it. But our taxpayers have been paying some funding into, and I'm not sure really what's being paid for, but it's some of the space within the building, I guess, at this. It's, that's why I was, and forgive me if I was a little bit kind of demanding of information, because I would like to hear the whole project as well. It could be a very good project, but there's a few things missed.
So if we're ready to move on, a big part of our statutory mission is to provide housing that will be permanently affordable. And we do that both with home ownership and with rental housing. We basically restrict what can happen. But I wanted to take a few minutes to talk to you about why that's important, and a little bit about the shared equity home ownership model. And what happens here, and I'll use the house you see in the bottom picture in Brookline, Vermont, as an example, kind of quintessential, gorgeous little Vermont Cape. And we helped somebody buy that home in 1993. And back then it cost $82,000. We made a $13,000 grant. And that family agreed to share the appreciation over time. It was purchased by a couple. They got divorced, and 6 years later, the wife remarried and sold the home. It was bought by a single mom in 1999 at a discounted price because it shared appreciation. She lived there till she got married, and in 2005, it got sold to a local realtor who couldn't find anything she could afford. She stayed there till 2018. The price of the home doubled by 2018. It was then worth $162,000. The value of our $13,000 subsidy, however, had grown to about $50,000. And so the next buyer got in for 110. If we projected that home grew by another 50% from 2016 to 2024, and it was worth $250,000, and this is happening all over the state, 50 homes come back on the market every year, we'd be able to resell it again for $150,000 without further taxpayer investment. So we think of this approach as, but for the public's help, somebody doesn't become a homeowner. And in return, they sell at a discounted price. They still get all the equity they earned by paying down their mortgage. They get a quarter of the equity increase in value of the home, and they walk away with cash. The first two families moved into conventional home ownership. So I think of it as a great starter home kind of program that we have worked on. The project that is being built in Shelburne at this moment will include 26 condominiums that'll use this kind of an approach.
I love that scenario. But
Yeah.
how do you assure that the person that you help out is going to maintain the property so that it does go up in value instead of turning into an eyesore?
That's a great question. And I guess what I would say to you is, one, it's in their interest to keep it up. The track record that we have is that almost everybody does. We have 5 homeownership centers in Vermont that we work through. We provide homeownership counseling before somebody becomes a homeowner. Talk to them about what the challenges are. I would say to you, this program is not for everybody. And when we've had failures, it's because we try to get somebody at such a low income in that they didn't have the capacity to maintain their home. So you learn through this process. As the chair said, I've been doing this a long time. I'm not going to tell you we've never made a mistake, but what I am telling you, we're getting about 50 homes come back on the market every year that are in good enough shape that people are buying them and investing in them. I think people want to see their values improve. There are occasionally homes where, a family situation where there's a divorce, a death, a disaster, and they can't maintain it. And sometimes they choose to sell. The home ownership center stays with them to help them and give them counseling if there's a big bump in the road. And sometimes the advice is, you've lost your job, your partner died, it is time to sell, you can't maintain this. Maybe it's get a roommate in another circumstance. Maybe it's refinance because interest rates at the right time went down. So, and the nonprofit that we've worked with will also work as the seller of the home when you're ready to sell. So it's the developer that stays with you through the process. Some people need no help at all over future years. Other people have ups and downs in life like we all do.
Sure. But it's counsel, it's not funding.
Generally, it's counsel, not funding. I will not say to you that we've never made a loan to help somebody rehab a property that got into trouble, but we thought it was better to hold it than to lose it. There have been a few foreclosures like there is. The studies that have been done nationally, though, show that with home ownership counseling, there's a much lower rate of default than without it.
I love the success story. Yeah. No
Okay.
doubt.
I'm going to talk about permanent affordability in rental housing as well, and then I want to just divert to the question that Chair raised at the beginning about why housing and conservation go together. The property on the left is in Burke, Vermont. It was developed by a private developer as a Section 8. It got worn out and old, and the family was ready to sell. The local nonprofit purchased it. They've added 8 apartments for the elderly here. In a community like Burke, between mountain biking and Kingdom Trails and the ski areas, a different investor would have converted this, whether Airbnb or market rate housing, and it would just be gone and the people displaced. So we think permanent affordability protects people of modest means. The middle picture is of Cambrian Rise, the old Catholic diocese in Burlington. And not all these buildings are yet built. We helped build the first 2 multifamily buildings. We're going to start on a third one as affordable housing. But there is also market rate housing. And in this location, what that means is there are some people renting in the market rate housing mid-2000s a month. SD Ireland is building the best building with views of the lake as condominiums. Anybody want to guess what a condo costs there?
2 million.
3 to 4.
Wow.
We together were right.
There might be some or less there, but
Is this off Pine Street or is this somewhere else?
North.
North,
The stuff on the right's not built yet.
yeah, the stuff on the right's not built.
Everything else is.
But what I want to say to you is this is the most mixed income neighborhood in the state of Vermont. You have people who had been unhoused living in some of the rental housing. You've got people who are auto mechanics or nurses' aides living in the affordable housing, or teachers' aides, or working in the library or cafeteria folks. If you didn't have a permanent restriction in a neighborhood like this, it would become an economically gated community. And that's why we think this is a really good policy to keep neighborhoods integrated economically that would otherwise not. The last piece story I want to tell is about Northgate Apartments. When we began this program, you'll remember Representative Carmel Babcock, Madam Chair.
Mhm.
This was in her neighborhood, 336 apartments, not far from the lake, largest multifamily development in the state of Vermont. And it was an out-of-state developer from Connecticut. And we spent $2.9 million, which was real money in 1990, to help preserve Northgate. A majority of the current nonprofit board are residents. They've run it well. They haven't needed any future investment. If we had to replace those 336 apartments today, we'd be talking $170 million. So what I want to say to you is the public investment in long-term protections is a good way for us to be spending public dollars. That's what we're trying to do. The last point I'll try to make very briefly is the site in the middle, as I understand it in Burlington, was quite controversial when the developer first proposed building here. And at that moment, we got the Vermont Land Trust involved, and they raised money along with a small grant from us to buy 12 of the acres that sit right along the lake and turn that into a public park. Once that was achieved, the idea that we could build densely on this site became much more acceptable. There were no appeals to the development. There was controversy, but not appeals to the development. And I think this is a great example of how housing and conservation really go together. And I think without those two facets, what the developer could have done would have been to build 25 starter castles with great views of the lake. He would have made a fair amount of money on his return, because I know what he paid for the college when after it was the diocese, it was Burlington College, and he could have built those starter castles and gotten his money back out in profit. This also represents for me the value of density. This is being built at 75 units to the acre. And so we're not sprawling out into the natural resources Vermonters tend to care about. To jump into water quality a bit and flood resilience, Water Street Park in Northfield is aptly named. If you were there right after Irene, you would have seen 7 homes that were destroyed and were participated in the buyout program. We helped families with a buyout. Part of the federal condition was to turn it into a place that there'd be no development on again. In the summer of 23, a decade later, this park flooded. There was some debris, but 3 days after the flooding, park was back in use. We've just agreed in Barry this is an architect's rendering, to build a building downtown because there's so many lost homes in the north end of Barry. You'll see more of that, I suppose, in the years to come in our work. Here's our overall investments in conservation all over the state since we began. Camp Dream is a mentoring program that takes place at affordable housing sites. Started by some of our AmeriCorps volunteers 25 years ago. They formed their own nonprofit. They decided, wouldn't it be great for the kids who are getting mentored for them to have a summer camp experience? We helped them buy a camp in Fletcher. Last year, we helped them buy an island on that body of water.
The island.
The island, you know it.
Yes, I do.
I haven't been there, but they had a great celebration. 2 projects we funded through the capital construction budget are here. Lily Pond is 615 acres and has a 100-acre wetland and about 7,000 feet of riparian corridors. Okemo was a very small investment, only $50,000. Again, 7 acres of wetland, 3,600 acres of riparian buffer. And if you're an outdoors person, a really important wildlife corridor. It's been identified as. This is a farm retirement project up in Brunswick, feeds into the Connecticut River. And as you can see, 183 acres of floodplain, 15 acres of wetlands. The Nature Conservancy, it's going to be owned by it is now owned by the Department of Fish and Wildlife. The Nature Conservancy has gotten some funding to do floodplain restoration. When you first asked us to retire land from agriculture, that was a new thing for us. Our statute tells us to conserve agricultural land for agricultural production. But there are some places in the state where some people should not be farming, and this is one of them. And so this land was taken out of agricultural production. It'll be restored and returned to its as a natural area. The Walcott Community Forest is 735 acres. This project was initiated by the elementary school principal in Walcott. So it's got 183 acres, 109 acre wetland on it, 29,000 feet of riparian buffers. And it's got trails on it and connects to the Lamoille Valley Rail Trail. So it'll be a reason for people to stop in Walcott for a different kind of biking experience. And it'll also function as a science lab for the kids in school. Walcott's quite excited about it. Agriculture and water quality. The fellow you see here, Dave DeFriest, is a fourth generation farmer. He wasn't sure he wanted to stay in agriculture. He went off to college and studied economics. He thought maybe he'd go to Wall Street or be a hedge fund manager. And then he changed his mind. He missed the farm too much. His family farms in the Mad River Valley up to Waterbury and over to Middlesex. And there they farmed lots of leased land, including the 60-acre parcel that was once part of a dairy farm. The couple that owned it, the husband died in 2018. He didn't have the resources in the Mad River to just buy it. And the Vermont Land Trust did used the new provision in the Farm Bill that Senator Leahy invented for us called Buy, Protect, Sell. So they bought it for him, leased it back to him. He'd been farming it for a number of years. And we closed on the sale last year with him. As you can see from the numbers there, 10,000 feet of 50-foot buffers on the Mad River. He retired 6 acres completely from agriculture. And I think this is a great example of what Representative Shaw, when he first said, would you do water quality projects, had in mind. And as you can see, since 2019, I can't remember what year you and he first introduced that idea. It was 17 or 18.
17 or 18. Right.
Since 2019, 80 miles of buffers and 1,400 acres of wetlands. So that's what we're trying to do with this section of the budget. A lot of our work is around transferring farms. When you sell development rights, and not everybody is made out to sell them, this is a willing buyer, willing seller approach. You reduce the cost by about 60%. That's usually, on average, the value of development rights. So if any of you know Mike Audette, he and his brother, longtime dairy farmers in Orwell, leased to this young Mr. Lucas for a number of years, and last year sold to him. I think he'd been leasing from them for about 7 years for the sale of development rights. The folks up in Fletcher had been farming on 10 acres, bought this farm with our help with development rights. And Liz, if I'm calling a fair amount of support from the viability program, Boneyard Farm.
Yes,
So-
we worked with them, I think after they moved to the bigger farm.
Yep. Okay. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you to talk about farm and forest viability and the water quality work you're doing. But I'm not leaving. I'm happy to answer more questions.
Thank you, Gus.
Amazing.
Lamoille Valley, Belcher, on the railroad there. It's the Lamoille Valley.
Afternoon, everyone. I'm Liz Gleason. I'm a program director for the Farm and Forest Viability Program and the Rural Economic Development Initiative. Thanks for having us. So I'm gonna talk sort of in the middle of this about the capital bill dollars, which fund the water quality grant program that we run. But before, I just wanted to tell you a little bit about what the Farm and Forest Viability Program does as a whole. We were established about 21, 22 years ago, after VHCB had been conserving farms for about 15 years. Doing those easements was really critical for farm viability, and there was more we could do. So Farm and Forest Viability is an in-depth, sort of individualized business development program for all kinds of agricultural businesses. It's mostly folks who have been in business for a couple of years who are wanting to figure out, how do I become more profitable? Do I grow? Do I focus on different markets? Should I add a value-added product? Should I do on-farm tourism? How to make important strategic decisions about their business with some outside help. Most small businesses that we work with don't get into that because they love small business management. They get into it because they love producing. They love doing the farming side, doing the forest business side. So we sort of exist to help build those management skills that you really need in a pretty competitive market that we have in the ag sector in Vermont. So we do succession planning for people who are trying to retire and figure out who will take over the land next. We do a lot of financial management to really understand cost of production. A lot of supporting people with access and capital, both grants and loans. A lot of help with bookkeeping, improving profitability. Agriculture is generally a pretty low margin business. People are not profitability, including being able to pay yourself and your employees a really good wage, is one of the primary goals for people that we work with. And I was looking at the numbers from the past couple of years, and we saw an average increase in profitability of 36%. So I'm really happy with those stats, and that's really helping people who are on the ground. We work with about 100 to 150 businesses a year. This is one on the left, the Goat Project in Bennington. This project is both a conservation easement and a business planning project. She's been producing on a really small scale, goat milk soap, working for another farm, and wants to make this more of a full-time thing. We also helped her with a super small grant for some creamery equipment, which I believe is on the way, and she'll be producing goat cheese over the next year. So we work with folks who are both really small at this growth stage and multi-million-dollar businesses. It's a pretty wide range. And in 2024, we worked with just over 100 clients, and those include dairies, both organic and conventional, veggie, projects like this, all kinds of livestock, and together those businesses made over 42 million in sales and held over 300 jobs. So it was a good economic footprint there. Just quickly, a little bit more on the economic vitality that we try to focus on. We work with a network of about 15 different business advisors we contract with to deliver the on-the-ground services. Those folks are extremely skilled. They are positions that exist at partner organizations like UVM Extension, the Intervale Center down in Burlington, which is where Diggers Mirth Collective is located, the Northeast Organic Farming Association of Vermont, the Center for an Agricultural Economy up in Hardwick. So it's a really wide range of organizational partners, and they work together with us. They decide they want to have a farm and forest viability business advisor position at their organization, and altogether that's about 15 people, all of whom have run their own farm or forest business in the past or been at a very high management level in that kind of business. So they have both the business skills and the production skills, and it really helps. It helps the people that we're working with feel like they can trust the advisors and that they know what they're talking about. And we see a lot of sales growth after working with our program. We see a lot of success with clients accessing capital. So last year, those 108 businesses that I talked about on the previous slide got support in accessing over $5.5 million in grants and loans for business expansion and improvement. About half of them added jobs, and everyone we worked with felt like they improved their management skills. So really happy about that. Diggers Mirth is one of many farms down at the Intervale Center. It's a really incredible agricultural resource. It's vulnerable to flooding, but it's such a rich resource and has great markets that they've really been able to do a lot, even though I'm sure you've heard about the flooding that they've experienced recently. I used to work down there at Adams Ferry Farm when it was in the Intervale, and got laid off halfway through the summer when it flooded 13 years ago. But the community engagement that we've seen down there the last 2 years has been really incredible, and almost all of the farms that operate down there are staying, and many of them have been there for a really long time. Just in the interest of time, I'm going to mostly skip this slide, but farmers and forest businesses really are at the front lines of climate change, and we see a lot of work around supporting people to build back after experiencing some disasters. Talking about the water quality grants. Did I hear you want to jump in?
Go ahead.
No, okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. So we have been part of the state's clean water budget specifically to run these water quality grants for farmers since about, I think, 2017. Yeah, and this is complementary to our business planning program, but they're not the same. This is for anybody who needs to do a water quality project, any farm that needs to do that. Most of the projects that we work with are quite complex projects that take a long time, that are often co-funded or leveraging money from NRCS or the Agency of Ag. So you'll see that we've last year awarded about 807,000, and that leveraged an additional 4.6 million. So people are putting in a lot of their own cash. They're working really closely with NRCS and the Agency of Ag to get these big projects and expensive projects done. These projects result in reduced runoff, they increase soil health, improve manure management, sometimes improve grazing infrastructure, all with the goal of reducing nutrient runoff into our waterways and making sure there's not too much phosphorus and excess nutrients in Lake Champlain and other water bodies. Yes, did you want to say something else? This little graph down here is shows that leverage and co-funding. So you'll see that in the upper left, the 807 of the well, last year we were funded through the was it Capital Bill? Clean Water Fund last year. But almost every other year it's been through the Capital Bill. So that 807 is then leveraging over 2 million from USDA and NRCS, 1.5 million through the Agency of Ag, and then a bunch of other sort of on-farm sources. These are mostly complicated projects that take a lot of partners and a lot of technical assistance coming together. So NRCS and the Agency of Ag really have that technical experience, and we bring in funding that's a little bit more flexible and are able to help get more projects over the finish line that people might not be able to afford otherwise.
So for the amounts that you get in a fiscal year for water quality grants, how long does it take you on average to get those state capital dollars out? Can you get that all out in fiscal year that it's allocated for? Or does it kind of carry over into subsequent years?
It really does carry over. We can commit them very soon. But most of these projects take multiple years to move through a process with NRCS or the Agency of Ag. And we're still coming off a period of what felt like a slowdown, like towards the end of COVID, where people just couldn't get the material they needed to do their work. They couldn't get the technical folks out there at the right timeline. So I think we're still a little bit in recovery from that. Some of the projects we fund can go out the door the next month. Things like equipment generally is really quick, but infrastructure takes longer. A lot of it is construction, which there's generally a little bit more demand for construction projects than there is labor for that. So some of the projects do take a couple of years to finish up.
Two other things. One is that to help the farm community, we actually will be considering this year's allocation in March, because having farmers do applications in the summertime just didn't make sense. So we waited to, we set a deadline for fall, late fall, early winter, and make those awards next month to farmers. And the other thing I think you should just be expecting is, to the degree that people need federal assistance, it's likely everything's going to slow down over the next 6 months. I just can't imagine, even if the only reason is just there's less federal employees to move the dollars, things are just going to move more slowly.
So for the committee, what you see in that bullet, 807,024, that is our money that has been in the capital bill, and on lines 102,
Yeah.
it's 800,000 for FY '26. There's nothing at this point for FY '27 because there's a different process for how these dollars are recommended in the clean water section. And we'll get into that, but there's a process that's put in place and it goes year by year. It doesn't do a 2-year look. So that's why for FY '27, in the clean water section, you don't see anything for any projects on any of those lines for FY '27, but we're putting aside $10 million of our capital budget for clean water projects in '27, but they haven't been delineated yet. And there's a process for that we'll get into. I don't want to do that right now. Sean?
Just quick, and I don't, if you can't answer it, I totally understand, but are we getting anywhere with clean water in rivers?
You read the state
We're
Slack.
asking
Just
about
like
urban.
pictures, I know that like the lake's struggling still, and
Yeah, the data is showing that there is progress being made. I know that there's a lot of people working so hard on this, and there's a real, it's not the kind of problem that you do the intervention and there's an immediate effect. Phosphorus in particular is like a legacy nutrient that a lot of the reason why this is such a problem right now is actually from decades ago. And not that there's not work to be done now, but it's not like that immediate benefit. But we see really strong demand for this funding. The Agency of Ag and NRCS have a lot of engagement from farmers who are wanting to put these processes in place. And so I feel positive about it. And I think in general, compared to, I've been in this role for almost 15 years, there was this investment that the state is making in clean water is just dramatically increased from when I started.
that's great. I mean, that's very helpful. Thank you.
I think I could add, in your part of the state, I believe that there's been a scientific measurement of reduction in phosphorus into the Wolflot River.
Yeah, they're trying.
Well, and that's one of, I just want, on Sean's point, is that you're not gonna see massive change in what's there. But as Senator Brock said years and years ago, you can't fix a problem while still putting pollution in there. You're gonna stop the pollution. So,
Yeah, and agriculture is a primary source, but not the only one. And, dirt roads, all of our activities as humans are part of this. And there's a lot of different approaches to cleaning it up. But there's some really exciting work happening, and everything from stopping runoff with these grants to sort of innovative projects like Four Girls Dairy on the right is working with UVM Extension to do sort of a mini research project on reducing nutrients that are brought in from out of state. A lot of the feed that we bring in from out of state is very high in nutrients. So if you can produce more on the farm, that can lead to less nutrients going into our waterways. So doing projects like that, there's a lot of different ways at it.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the last 3 sentences.
Yeah, it was not very clear, but
No, I just am ignorant.
yeah, so on dairy farms in particular and livestock farms, you often, not everyone, but there's buying in feed that comes from out of state. And that feed can often be higher in nutrients than the feed that you might grow on your own farm. So
And higher nutrient out.
yes, higher nutrients and higher. So UVM was working with a group of farms to try to produce their own feed on farm with lower nutrients. That would be like better digestibility for the cows, which also equals fewer nutrients out. So trying to say not just like, let's not have manure going directly into waterways, but let's look at all the other ways that nutrients are coming into the state and how to turn off other spigots, basically.
Does that affect the milk production?
Digestibility of feed, you want your cow to be able to digest their food to make good milk. So it hopefully improves lots of things.
You're hoping it improves.
Yeah.
Well, because if something like just with ourselves, if we're eating something and most of it's coming out wherever and not being used by our bodies, that's inefficient. So same with cows, except in this case, it's polluting the water and other
Yeah,
things.
no, I understand that part. I just.
Wait till they get into hatcheries
I
and
thought this
insects.
Way too much information.
Yeah, this is at my dining table with my little kids. This is what we call potty talk.
Well, the reason I ask is because if we're hurting the farmers because they can't produce and they can't stay in business because they're losing revenue, then that's another balancing factor. That's all I'm asking.
Totally, yeah.
Understand biology.
And well, with this particular intervention, the goal was that it would have multiple benefits, including hopefully not hurting milk production. I don't have the answer on this one,
Fair
but
enough.
yeah.
Kevin, that's what I wasn't trying to get into. Biology.
I
Is that they're
got you.
being better with nutrients so that more of it's digested and not coming out. It's helping is what I'm trying to say.
You never know what you get into and it's.
Yeah.
Cow manure.
You think it's
Manure
boring.
management right here. That's what we're talking about. Maybe I can just spend 60 seconds on our Rural Economic Development Initiative because it's a really fun program. Would love for all of you to know about it in case any of your communities can take advantage. So this was set up partially under the strategic leadership of Senator Starr in 2017. Also, specifically to help small rural communities access big federal dollars. We saw a real capacity gap in like communities that don't have full-time staff or on farms and small communities that there were federal funds available that we just weren't able to draw down. So we started this grant writing program. We work with small communities, help them identify big federal grants, sometimes other complicated state or philanthropic dollars, and help them bring those down. So everything from farm businesses like Maplebrook Farm, working on their mozzarella.
Great mozzarella.
Mozzarella.
Absolutely.
They got $500,000 from the USDA for that. Working with libraries, working on water and wastewater. This is a historic general store down on the right-hand corner. So it's a really wide range of projects that we could support, and please let us know if there's anyone in your communities that needs help accessing those big dollars. Thank you. I think I'm only over by 5.
Oh, that's fine.
Great.
Super. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, great to be here.
So the 800,000 that is on line 102 is for water quality grants that go directly to our farmers, and our
Yep.
farmers do pay in a little bit for this. Are you planning on touching a little bit on the land conservation and water quality projects for the 2 million?
Well, I think when we covered a few of those slides, such as the DeFriest Farm and some, the Athens project, those are the sorts of things we're doing with land conservation, where we're protecting wetlands, we're protecting waterways on those high points, that kind of thing. So that's what we're doing there. We should also say that projects like the Tangway Farm, where we took it out of production, is one of the things that $800,000 can be used for. Some years we have a project like that, other years we don't, and then we have 200,000 into this program for the on-farm interventions. But we are looking for those opportunities.
So I know the governor has proposed in the other part of your budget that you would receive the full amount of the property transfer tax.
My understanding, yeah.
And how much is that would be appropriated through the general fund. You know?
with a couple of deductions there, but
So do any of those dollars get funneled in with any of the 2.8 total that comes from the capital bill?
we are spending more than the 2 million on conservation. And we always insist on the same level of water quality benefits, whichever, if they're waterways, but we're also funding conservation where there's occasionally very little water resources on the project.
Right,
So I think this came as a recommendation from the Clean Water Board.
right, right. Sure.
While I have you here, you've gotten an email from those of us who are doing the repo. Yeah, anything you need to talk about there? There's two big chunks of money there, one from 2021, one from 2022.
So the vision system doesn't capture commitments that we make. Captures, I believe,
Encumbrances.
and I think you just got an email back from Holly.
Oh, he did mention that yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
so I think we are, we have a little bit left to disperse, but not to commit.
It's all been committed. There's one project that's closing at the end of this.
Did you detail that out for us in your email?
I did.
Okay, thank you.
And if you have more questions, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you.
So is it fair to say that the bulk of the money they get from the property transfer tax, you kind of split that more evenly between affordable housing and conservation, but it kind of depends on the pressures of that particular year? Or I would think there's more pressures right now on affordable housing than there would be
There
on
is,
conservation.
and we will, and as you know, Madam Chair, there's been, as I showed in that one slide, a lot of one-time money that is not likely to be repeated at the same level this year for housing. So
Like ARPA and
like ARPA and the general fund one-time dollars that we've gotten. So we expect more pressure on our budget for housing in the time.
questions? Thoughts, questions?
No, that's great presentation.
No more body talk.
Are people clear about the 2.8
Yeah.
that they're asking
Yep.
for?
Crystal.
So markup comes along.
Yes.
Start asking questions,
Well,
right?
recognize.
Anything else?
We really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And support. And if there's anything going on in your communities where you think we can play a positive role, let us know what it is and we will do our best.
Thank you so much, Gus and others. Thank you.
The great work you do, thank you.
I know a general store in Fairfield. Yeah.
You know Ben Doyle?
No.
He's with a group called the Preservation Trust of Vermont, and they run around the state and are providing technical assistance to groups that want to revive county sewers and work in Elmore, Putney, East Callis. I'd probably be one of those show. He'd be a resource if people in Fairfield want to.
Well, I was just a spice store.
Oh, okay. You gotta be careful, you're on YouTube.
Eleanor seems like it's gonna come together though. That was very hopeful. I read that whole article and how that family, how that's being, handled.
It's a hard business.
I know it is.
I mean,
They're they're stepping it up. They really are.
Yeah, it's
So.
very challenging.
Great. Thank you.
Thank
you. So
Thank you all.
So before the committee disperses, I want to give you how the money for section 10 gets put in there, because it's very different than the rest of the capital. Okay, and this was purposely set up when we first tackled clean water, which was back in 2017 is when we really did the work on this. There was the administrator at that time proposed, I believe, about almost 25 million capital dollars to go towards clean water. And it was 50 million over 2 years. And it started in 2017. So the committee was really concerned on a number of factors. We already were funding some projects like VHCB we were doing. We were doing the Clean Water Revolving Loan Fund through the Agency of Natural Resources. We were also doing the municipal pollution grant. So if you have your spreadsheet in front of you,
Yeah.
section 10,
Mhm.
if you look at lines 97 and 98, we were doing that anyway through Department of Environmental Conservation. Those are dollars that go directly to our towns. We were doing some with land conservation and water quality with VHCB. And we were doing some work with Agency of Ag.
Yeah, sure, question.
Uh-huh.
97 has nothing on either line.
Right, we're gonna get into that.
Okay.
So the way that we structured this, in the world of clean water, there is a Clean Water Fund Board. And it is made up of folks from the administration, could be the fifth floor, could be Agency of Ag. I don't know if the treasurer's on that, there's a whole group of folks.
To go.
Clean Water Fund Board. And they are the ones that make the recommendation for how much of the Clean Water Fund, which is funded with general fund, and there's some revenue sources that also go into that. I can't remember which ones. The capital bill does not go into that particular Clean Water Fund. That's all more of your general fund dollars, dollars from revenues. But when they wanted to beef up the commitment of the state to meet our TMDL, total daily maximum load of phosphorus, there was a big infusion of capital dollars. And we wanted to make sure that that infusion of capital dollars did not go towards operating costs. We wanted to make sure it went to construction costs. So we put in statute, we put in language that became law, that capital bill dollars would go into a separate fund within the Clean Water Fund. It will be separate from the revenues that go into the fund. And those dollars from the capital bill could only be used for construction. So this $10 million in FY '26 would go into the Clean Water Fund for capital projects. Not operating, only construction projects.
Equipment too, I'm hearing.
Equipment, yeah. But the real thing was real clear, we weren't gonna pay for operating costs on anything. The other monies in the Clean Water Fund that's funded with revenues coming in, that can go anywhere. So we wanted to put a fence around our capital dollars. So in doing so, we said, we're gonna look towards the Clean Water Fund Board to make recommendations. We'll put aside X amount of dollars in our capital budget for clean water. And it will be up to the Clean Water Fund Board to make recommendations on where that 10 million gets spent and how much for the line items. So that's why, if you look on section 10, you will see in FY '26, on lines 106, there was $10 million there.
Mhm.
The Clean Water Fund Board made the recommendation that 3 million of that would go to the Agency of Ag, for water quality grants, 4 million will go to municipal pollution grants, 200 to forests and parks for access road, water quality investments, as well as the VHCB with 2.8. The governor has proposed keeping 10 million, putting 10 million aside for FY '27, but you look for all those projects, there's no dollar amounts for '27 because the board hasn't made recommendations for them. They will come the fall. October, November of this year, it's more like November, they will make a recommendation on how that $10 million for '27 is divvied up. So that's where these numbers came from for section 10. So they make that recommendation to the fifth floor, and the administration has honored those recommends. So that's what you see reflected here.
They'll make recommendations in the fall of 2025, like this fall.
Yes, for FY '27.
Thank you.
Did you want to know who was on the board?
Yeah, he was a lot of,
So it's, the board is made up of designated people. It's this, somebody from the Secretary of Administration designee, Secretary of Natural Resources or designee, Secretary of Ag or designee, Secretary of Commerce or designee, Secretary of Transportation or designee, and then 6 members from the public who are not legislators with expertise with one or more following subject matters. And it's the things you would think of for this board. So that's what it is.
And so that's where these recommends have come from. So it's a different structure. So I just wanted to give that background, and we put that in place when the capital bill was being really looked on. I think it was 24 million. I think a total was almost $50 million over 2
Yeah,
years. It
the
was
first
a
time, yeah.
big infusion of capital dollars, and we just wanted to make sure that it was going to construction projects and not being used for operating costs. So that's why we delineated that, and that's part of the work that we do as a committee. If we see some things coming up and it's not defined, it's like, what language can we put in? What language, what do we need to do for statute to really build the structure? If this is going to be an ongoing appropriation or an ongoing allocation, ongoing projects that are funded by the capital, by bonded dollars. So we can put those parameters around there. The other thing too, we can do, and we haven't done this too much. I don't think we didn't do it. I don't think we did it in the last biennium. Remind me, folks. But doing a 2-year budget cycle, sometime in that first year of the budget, there's a project that really needs to get out the door. And people are very supportive of the project. And there could be 2 million in FY26. And there could be 1 million in FY27 that would complete the project. We know come January of next year, we're going to go through our own budget adjustment process. So that means you review again the dollars you've put in 26, along with the dollars you put in 27. We can move money around. We can go back to FY26 and say, they didn't get those dollars out the door. We gave them $2 million. We're going to pull $1 million and use that someplace else. We can do that in budget adjustment. We can do that. There may be a project that we really don't want to do that because we're really clear we want this project to go and we don't want hands taking some of that money and using it somewhere else. So we put a fence around it. And we'll put language that says something to that effect. This 2 million is not subject to the BAA. And we put a fence around it. Now, that's not to say you don't have a gate in the fence, but you put a fence around it. And that really says, hey, we're not going to go back and pull money from that particular project.
Yeah.
We didn't do that, I don't think, in the last biennium, but we've done that in the past when we were really clear, like when we were rebuilding the Waterbury complex. We wanted to make sure that money was going to be there, so we put a fence around it.
Yep.
So those are little techniques that we've done in the past. Doesn't come in on the governor's recommend. It's what we figure out as a committee. So I'm sure we'll be doing some things. And like particularly with those 3 projects that we just heard about, the 3 million, I'm sure we're going to have language. If we agree to any money going to any of those projects, we'll probably be working up language to direct where those dollars are going to go. So it's not going to be just handing over $1 million. There'll be some strings attached, I'm sure, but that will come from this committee, from what we hear from testimony and what people are feeling. So I just want to give a heads up that that's some of our legislative work when we do markup. That makes sense?
Yep.
Questions? All right.
New topic.
I want to make sure there's no confusion or questions on this.
I do have a quick question. Sorry, Troy.
You're good.
So with, I don't know, maybe I wasn't paying attention, but like a lot of these people have, with BGS and DOC, they have been sharing with us what they spent, what they didn't spend. This presentation didn't go over that.
Which one?
Oh, the
We're just-
VACB.
Yeah, So they didn't tell us we have this much money left over from like 2 years ago or 1 year ago. Are they supposed to do that or not?
They should, and we should have asked them.
Okay, so I just, because I'm just trying to get my,
We should have asked them because you really need to see that flow.
Yes.
right, and that's what I was, and I just caught it now. I should have asked then, but it's, anyway,
That's
okay,
why we have 11 members of the committee, so people can
all right.
chip in and ask those questions.
Yeah,
Because that's really important. BHCB is really good about getting the money out the door.
right.
Yeah.
It seemed like that was
They do.
the case.
Yeah.
You know, because it's not, they don't have that much money to get out the door.
They
Not
seem-
like the other guy.
We usually are pretty excellent at getting.
I did ask about that 807 there for 24, how quickly can you get the money out the door in the fiscal year? And it's really difficult because it's so contingent on the farmers coming forward with the projects
Mhm.
and then piecing together those different money sources to have the project go forward. So it's really good. What we have found over the years, VHCB is very diligent in
Okay.
getting the dollars
That's
out the
good.
door. Yeah,
Hope we're cloning Gus.
this is really good.
He is.
He's a straight shooter. It's a straight shooter. Yeah, it's really good. So we don't, sometimes you build a rapport with folks over the years on a project. Dry hydrants, that's another one. They really get the dollars out the door. They've been doing this for years. It's a small amount, it's 125,000. But they get the dollars out the door. And then there's others that it's slower to get the dollars out the door because they're working with more entities that they have. Yeah.
And it's tangible results.
Yep.
Not a tangible results we just heard.
Yes.
Yes. And that's the
True.
beauty of the capital bill. You will see tangible results. Other questions before we go to Troy with something new?
Troy, New York or Troy, Vermont?
No, Troy. At least I haven't called him Troy.
But you have.
Yes.
Recently.
Good ones.
I will be returning the bill back to Ledge Council with co-sponsors for the Lund expanding the Lund family, the Kids Apart program, beyond, Chittenden County,
Mhm.
Regional County up to Northern County. This is the testimony we heard a few weeks ago. So if you want to be on that, I sent an email, Sunday, recently.
But me saying yes on emails enough? No.
Yes.
We used to have to sign the sheet. Now
I
you
mean,
don't
I
have to
can,
sign any sheet.
No, I gotta
sign you, but it'd be nice if you wanted to be on it. That way I know for certain you
Okay.
filled out the Google form.
You can
Okay.
sign the
I
sheet.
think
Email.
I recall us being in fairly good consensus that that was a good use of that program, and expanding that program makes sense. So it'd be nice to have a strong committee presence on that bill, but I'll leave it up to you all to decide by tomorrow. But
Do you have the bill with you?
I sent it, I just have it in digital
It's on-
format. I sent
It's on the
I sent a bill summary and the actual bill draft in my original email.
Okay.
So you want us to say yes or no again?
Did you fill out the Google form?
I fill in a Google form. I sent you a yes.
Well,
What a sound.
Don't the dinosaurs here.
Who's a yes? Who's a yes? Who knows they're a yes?
We used to have sign-up sheets. You
And
physically
you're a
have to
yes,
sign
Kevin?
your name.
I pulled it up.
You're-
I got it.
That's what they should be doing, and people will talk to each other instead
Will,
of sending
I
out.
think you signed it. Right, Connor, you're a yes?
Yeah, sure.
The whole all house.
You already signed, I think. You're a
Thank
yes?
you.
And so am I, Troy. But the thing is, it doesn't have it attached to this email for me.
There's one that I sent to all house.
Yeah.
And then I followed that up saying, hey, committee, pay attention. I just sent out an email that you're all part of.
Nobody in the committee.
Yes or no? You want to let me know tomorrow, or you know?
I'm a no.
Oh, I see it now.
Dang.
Are you on? Do you want to be on this or not?
No, not as chair of a committee, no.
Martin's on.
That's Martin. I don't do that. He's not the one in the.
All right.
Sitting in.
For
the
those of you who
chair.
just verbally confirmed, I will add you myself.
Thank you.
But you don't have to fill out a Google form. 'Cause that's hard to do.
I don't.
Well, I still can't find it. Oh, wait, see what the two attached.
We're on YouTube.
Sorry.
We're on YouTube. So tomorrow, did we find anybody for 9 o'clock? Because we had Forest and Parks at 9. they're unable to come in because there's a family situation that
Hmm.
happened with one of the members, so they're not gonna meet with the repo group either.
I reached out to BGS about H50. They're not available to come in early, but they are coming in later this week. I just reached out to Tom Burdett about H176 to do an intro. And I haven't yet heard back from him. And Kate Eberly wrote back and said that Commissioner Fitzko would be willing to come in and give the committee an overview of Forest Parks and Recreation if the chair thought that would be
That might be
useful.
helpful. Yeah, let's do that at 9. Let's plan that for her.
And if Representative Burdett says that he would come in, should I still
Yeah, because I don't know if Forest and Parks overview is gonna
take
take
a whole
a whole
hour?
hour, so you could do it towards the end.
Okay.
What time would you want Tom to come up? If you come,
He's gonna work it.
because I can get you an answer right now.
Yeah, he'll work it.
All right.
Anything else before we break for the day? And
No.
9 o'clock tomorrow morning, we'll be back at 9.
It's 8 o'clock.